not a complex migration and demo that we're going to show off here, but we just want to start the conversation, show the capabilities of the technology and what we're doing here. To that end, what I've shown here initially is our source machine. So this is the 2003 server. This is where the application currently resides. So in this case, it is a very straightforward WordPress page. Nothing complex here again, right? But there's a little bit of tweaks that have happened to this guy. Currently, there's an Apache component, a MySQL component, again, sitting on server 2003. We're not limited to only those applications or only this source machine. We can use 2000, 2003, 2008, 2012, 2016. If somebody wants to do like-to-like, we can use any of those for our source servers. But all of the action and all the fun stuff is actually happening here on the destination server. In this case, it is a 2012 R2, but we're not limited to that as the destination server. We're limited to 64-bit flavors of the Windows operating system. So 2008 R2, 2012 R2, 2016 on that side of things. The only piece of software we need to have installed to kick off the migrations is our Virtamove software. So we're not just moving preferences, configurations, and data after the base install of an application is already there. We're moving all of that plus the actual application itself, right? So all of the components that are required for that application to work, the install path, the preferences, configuration, services, registry information, application DLLs, all of that good stuff, everything that's required, we move. And we do that with this here, the administrative console, right? So I've taken some of the easy steps already. They're not so much fun, but they're required. So I've created a folder holding location. So we put that in C appliances, and we've called it VA container, just a name and convention. That can be whatever you want. Now I've connected to the source machine using the IP address and our source agent across the tethered link. So we can also use the host name, the fully qualified. You could click that query network button to be able to choose a source from the list on the network. And the source agent tool is a really key part of our migration process. So it's a small utility that's installed on the source machine, runs as a service, and it connects to the destination server, or the destination server connects to it using an encryption key that's generated during the installation of this administrative console. So it's a unique key to this installation on this server in this environment, not replicated anywhere else for security reasons. And it is, again, copied over to that source machine, linked together, and now there's an encrypted link here, handshake on both ends. Not only is it encrypting any data moving from source to destination, but we're also compressing it. So we have a custom compression algorithm which will shrink down anything that's being transferred to overcome latency concerns. So our source agent is addressing two things at the same time, right? Security and latency. So whether you're moving to the cloud or not, or whether you have secure applications or data, we're taking that into consideration and helping as much as we can and being as secure as we can. Now that these two servers are linked together, the source and the destination, we've gone through some pre-checks, which are just really a set of lessons learned across the hundreds and thousands of application migrations that we've done in a variety of different customer environments. We know what to look for, which is going to set us off on the wrong foot, and we have that pre-check in place so that we set off on the right foot. Once that pre-check is passed, then we move on to finding the applications. Tell me what's on that source machine so that we can actually start selecting very specifically what we want to bring across. So this is really a representation of what's in the add remove programs. We're not limited to just those applications. If there is a non-published application, we can select that as well. It does happen occasionally, so we don't have it as part of this demo, and the route is a little bit different, but at the end, the goal is to bring the application over. So no worries or concerns there. Once we have the list of applications, this is where things get to be a lot different from our software, from other migration tools that are perhaps migrating the whole OS. We can be very, very selective. We can choose exactly which applications we want to bring across. So in this case, we want to grab the Apache product, and we want to grab the MySQL component. We don't care about anything else. So regardless of how many applications are on here, you can choose 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is, but be very specific and only bring those across. Once you've selected those applications, our intelligence in the background really starts to kick in, and we make some determinations. Some are pretty easy, right? So based on the application published name, we know where it's installed, the installed location, if it's in C program files, etc. But we're also able to glean and figure out and determine services associated with those applications. If there are accounts that are local on that source machine, we're able to determine that and automatically select them if they're required. So whether it is a group or a user account on the local server, so that source machine, we'll select it. Perhaps there's COM, DCOM, COM plus information, or scheduled tasks even. We'd be able to display those and select them. We display all of that information for review purposes. So if there is an app owner who is extremely knowledgeable and wants to dive down and say, hey, make sure we grab this service or that or what have you, because if that service stops or that user account gets locked out, that's when my phone blows up, and I don't want that to happen, so let's make sure we grab it. That's why we have all of that information displayed. If there's no app owner that is not knowledgeable, which is more the case, that's fine. We can again, rely on our automated intelligence in the background by grabbing the components that are required. Once we make those selections, then we start the copy process. And we call that pre-population because it happens ahead of time, right? So before we move into any kind of exercise or UAT, we need to have the application components brought over to the destination server. So we're copying at this time. It is a copy out process. We're not making any changes configuration-wise or deletions or anything of that nature on that source machine. We're just bringing over the information, making a copy of it in order to be able to run it on the destination server itself. There's a couple of things that are happening in the background. One of them that we call is a configuration on the fly. So we actually will go through and seek into clear text files, so preferences, configuration files and such, for variables that would need to be modified and changed in order for that application to work correctly on the destination server. The most common variable that we look at and substitute out is the host name of the source machine. Usually that's present somewhere in the configuration of the application. And of course, we want to substitute that out for the host name of the destination server. We'll take care of that process automatically. If there's a strict requirement to keep that host name, and we're actually going to rename the destination server to match the configurations of the source machine, whether it's the IP address or the host name or both. We can bypass our config on the fly. We can modify it. It's very tweakable in that perspective to be able to choose different variables or do exclusions on specific folder structure or file types. So it's a pretty powerful component of our process. Once we've brought everything over, we're really now entering what we call the exercise phase, but it is a portion of it really is called the user acceptance testing or testing phase at this point. We want to bring the application to life and show that it's working correctly on the destination server itself. Right? To that end, what we need to do is go through a process that we call dock. It's bringing the application to life, making it visible on the destination server. So we're gracefully introducing services, those user accounts, registry information, etc., to the underlying OS, allowing it to see the application and vice versa. Once that dock process completes, we can start the services, whether it's from within the context of our administrative console, or we could open up the services menu and view them there. Either way, the act of that starting that service is also a file verification process. As the application starts calling files, we're confirming that we have those files within the context of our Virtamove container, right? So we're saying, hey, every time it calls up, we'll serve that piece of the application up to whichever portion calls upon it. So we can actually go through and test that application out.
Just to explain one thing, Scott, Nigel, so this is now functioning inside of our holding location or container that's in the VAA container now. There's an intercept layer between those services and the OS, and we're handling all of that process inside the container. And now the application is running in there. I'm not sure that was clear, but You may have some questions about that.
Sure. So I'll expand on that just a little bit, Nigel, since you pointed me in that direction. Thank you. So you can see here the Apache service that I've just called up. The path here is now in C Appliances VA container. That's the location that we created to hold all of the application information. And if I actually have a peek at the dependency, we have the Virtamove controller services, the dependency here. So again, we're controlling that portion, allowing this service to be seen by the underlying OS and vice versa, right? So we're in control of that guy at this time. And you can see the application, this simple WordPress page is running localhost on the destination server, but again, within the context of the Virtamove container. So you can continue running that application within the context of our container. It has all of the functionality of the application, so the administrator can do whatever they do, and outside folks, users can connect to it, etc. But what most folks want to do is move to the dissolve stage. So pushing those contents directly to the underlying OS. So all of the things that we've talked about so far, the folder structure, the files contained within, registry, services, app DLLs, etc., all push to that underlying OS in a similar fashion that we would have done if you had found that installed media and gone through that next finish process, but without the hassle of trying to figure out how to reconfigure the application so it matches what was on the source machine, then figuring out how to extract the data, import the data, and all of that hassle. We take care of all of those components. So not only bringing the application again, but all of the data, all of the preferences, all of the history of the application that resides on that source machine comes along at the same time and now is being pushed to that underlying OS. So it will operate independently of the Virtamove software. So it's no longer dependent on us, right?
Why don't you explain compress and uncompress and why you may want to take the contents of the container briefly too? Absolutely.
Thank you, Nigel. So one of the other functions, as Nigel was talking about, is the compress function. So this is where we can take all of the contents of the Virtamove container, all of the application bits and pieces, and compress them, put them into a single file. That single file then becomes very copyable, and you can replicate that application to additional locations, right? So you could create now a dev test environment where they may not have been able to do that previously. The other thing that you can do is if you're looking at moving the application from a location where there is poor connectivity, we could set up a staged migration as well. So moving it to a sandbox location, do all of the testing, then find its permanent home wherever that happens to be. So what I can do now is refresh our services, have a look at this Apache service. And you can see now it's residing in C program files, where it would be if we had actually gone through the installation process. And that Virtamove controller service is no longer listed here as a dependency, right? So this guy is just by de facto really installed on that destination server. And if I have a peek for the MySQL server, or service rather, it's in the same kind of situation here. So it is in C program files where we would find it. No longer has that dependency. And what I can do is two different things here. I'm going to have a peek at programs and features. We see that Apache is listed here, and same with MySQL. The Virtamove software could be uninstalled. We don't need to have it there any longer. But what I can do is now have a peek at the localhost page. So that makes sense. We're in no territory here, but the page is operating as we expect it to. Everything's working at this point in time. And there's no need to have the Virtamove software any longer on this destination server. We've done our job. We've moved it from A to B.
So let's move on then to Maestro and Monitor, which are kind of analyzing the network in a broader way and solving some of what we would call templating problems, where you learn the template in advance of a migration. So you can load that template, and there can be reproducible templates that are used to scale up the problem. Okay. All right, over to you, Scott. Let's go over the next phase.
So this is going to be a little bit different. It's a video rather than a straight demo, but you can see already that our interface is a lot different because we were talking about doing an orchestration through our product. It is a web login. Immediately, it might be a little bit overwhelming because we already have sources that we've discovered, right? So we're already looking at applications that we've seen that are out there on source servers within this environment. The reality is the larger the bubble, then the more of that instance of that application is present. But being able to drill down, you can see into a variety of different servers. These are the set of servers that have that particular application on it. But if you select that server, choose into more, you can see which applications specifically are installed on that server in conjunction with its hardware physical characteristics. So its IP address, how many disks are there, that kind of information as well, right? And being able to see into some of those other features and information that we had present within the administrative console on our one-to-one migrations, right? The users and groups, we can do a basic pre-check, etc. But there, again, on this view here, we can actually group it a few different ways. Excuse me. This is our map view, group by applications. Again, the larger the bubble, the more instance of that application there is. We can stay on this map view, but instead viewing just the servers. So these are a list of the servers that we're seeing into. And as Mark touched upon, depending on the icon, means whether we have a connection to it, a secure connection or not, using our source agent, or whether we know it's out there or has an outdated agent, etc. And we can choose on each one of those servers and find out additional pieces of information about it and get back to that same menu we saw previously. We can also go to a more traditional view, the list view. Some of the, again, traditionalists out there in the IT environment would probably prefer that, being able to sort columns and view that information, but be able to drill down again by selecting any of those. Anytime you see this search box on any of our menus, it is an active search box, so you can choose in and say, hey, show me anything that starts with this specific IP range or what have you. We can also start grouping, again, a list view, but by application, and finding out, again, how many source servers have that particular application installed on it, and break that out to the installed components for more complex applications like SQL itself. And on all of these menus, you can see there are the monitor option to be able to start watching this application, as well as exclude options. So if there's a specific application that is never going to be monitored, we don't want to migrate that one, we're approaching it a different way, or it's been discontinued, we can do exclusions as well, either by application or by server itself. Right, so a lot of different ways to view valuable information in the customer's environment, in your environment. And again, all searchable, sortable, etc. Lots of different ways to view the same information. It is really like an active live CMBD for servers, breaking down its information and applications, etc. Right? When we want to start doing the monitoring side of things, we can be very specific. We can monitor applications or applications on a specific server. To do that a few different ways. We've seen that monitor toggle here and there. But again, this is starting the watching of the application as it's being used on that source machine, and seeing when this application is being used, what are the components that are being touched. We're creating a shopping list. I use that term in other demos, etc., but I think it's the right way. So we're creating the shopping list of application components that need to be migrated, and we're gathering that information ahead of time as it's being used. So we're getting very accurate and more robust information than we did with our traditional migration path, because we're seeing, again, as it's being used. So we'll find out not only the install path, but additional information, where the data is being housed, if it is on the same server, that it may be in a file location that's somewhere else. We can also start finding other information too, related to kind of what Mark was talking about in terms of dependencies and ports and such, and being able to see that information. Excuse me. But what we're looking for on the monitoring side of things is a rate of change. When does our shopping list start slowing down? When are we not adding any additional information associated with the application? When that rate of change starts slowing down is when we're gaining confidence that the application is ready to move to the next step, ready to be migrated from this particular source machine to a designated destination server. So interdependencies, this is more along the lines of what Mark was talking about. We can see by choosing this link option within our menu how this application set is connected together. So it's telling us in this instance by the dotted line that they have a relationship. We dig down, we can find out they're actually all three of these applications on the same server. So it's valuable information in terms of if we decide to migrate one of those components, there will be effect on additional layers, and how are we going to address that? Do we need to do all three of them at the same time? Do we need to do it staged or what have you? And if we jump into the server view and try and find those links, we can see there are additional items touching this server. We don't know about them because we don't have our source agent installed on them. So they may be users, desktops, or it might be other computers or other servers that have a component associated with this application in some fashion or other. So we need to investigate further and say, hey, what's going on with that particular server? What's that IP address? What is happening here? If we move that application, are we breaking something? So this is telling us it's investigation ahead of time. And because this is, as I said, a bit of an active CMBD, being able to tell us information about the environment, the applications, the servers, we have a whole bunch of reporting that can come out of here, which is good for project managers and C-level managers and whoever else wants this type of information. And we can break it down, which ones are being monitored, how far along the monitor path we are, which server is that on, what's the application, monitoring percentage, etc. And this can all be generated into PDF reports that can be emailed around and, looked at and pondered upon, etc. Over time. And again, that can happen on any one of the screens that we've been on so far. The other nice thing that it lets us do is be able to right-size destination servers. So because we're doing that monitoring, again, we can do some capacity planning associated with the application and those servers and such, and be able to, again, like I said, right-size the destination server themselves. Especially important if we're moving into cloud environments. And we want to make sure that we're not over-provisioning or perhaps under-provisioning when moving there. When we go to the migration side of things, we're looking to say, or the monitoring side of things will tell us we're ready to go, and it will give us that green bubble here, and our confidence is there. We've met that threshold of change. We're not seeing any new information being brought in on that monitor side, so we're ready to move to the next step. To do that, we need to associate a destination server to that source machine itself, right? So we can say, let's link those together, and now we can start the migration process itself. We're actually mapping, I guess, is the term that we want to use here. And now that those are associated together, automatically in the background, we will start the migration process. So associated with pre-checks and ensuring that users and groups that are local on that source machine that are required, that we've picked up with the monitor side of things, will be enabled on the destination side, right? So again, all automatic and automated. And the nice thing here is we can have one user who is working on one group of applications or one group of servers. We can set up accounts within the Maestro side of things, or you can just have one guy banging away and setting everything up and clicking off the monitor side of things. It allows to create a lot of efficiencies and a whole a team aspect of being able to do things rather than a strict one-on-one. So gaining efficiencies there. Once the servers are linked together, again, it's pretty automated, this process. Once the license is popped in there and validates that you're able to move on to the next stage, we start the whole migration and start copying all of that data and moving it to the destination server, readying for user acceptance testing or that exercise phase that we talked about in the first live migration, the one-to-one migration. Again, in the exercise phase, jumping onto that destination server, being able to run the application through its paces, confirm that everything is working as expected, and then automatically go through that undock process and push it through to dissolve. And then it can be cut over at that point and ready for additional layer of testing if you wanted to, or put right into production because it is complete from the Virtamove perspective.
Yeah, it's licensed per source server. So if you have one or many applications, you pay per source server. It can go to one or more destination servers. If you had several applications, you can containerize them into different targets on the migration process. The thing to understand is in the process of coming up the learning curve and green lighting the application, we build a migration template. If there are commonalities in the applications where templates can be reused, that can accelerate the process. The other thing is if the monitor is installed, you can encourage users at that time to make full use of the product. So if they exercise or use all functionality in the product quickly over a day or so, then we're going to build a very complete template up quickly. So there are things that can be done by the users and in templating that will cause this whole process to accelerate. Everything that's learned in the monitor is loaded into the migrate process automatically, and it minimizes the test cycle. If you want to, you can, of course, use automated test scripts and things like that to exercise the target environment. It doesn't have to be a human, but mostly we're finding that it is a human that ultimately does that exercising. So that's the full suite. It's a bit overwhelming when you see it in one day, but we're certainly open to any questions that you may have about it and how it works and how it scales.